It's 1928 and one of the most controversial polar explorers of his age flies out on a desperate rescue attempt of his most bitter rival. Let's explore the life and sudden death of Roald Amundsen. The North and the South Poles have been the subject of much speculation and myth building. To the ancient and early modern world, it might as well have been outer space. The explorers who went into these regions knew that they all faced almost certain death. Whether it was cold, drowning, starvation, hostile wildlife, scurvy, poisoning, depression, or madness, they had to be prepared to pay the ultimate price. From a young age, Roald Amundsen was determined to be one of them. When his mother died, any family ties that may have compelled him to stay within the safe confines of a middle-class life were cut. Roald joined the International Antarctic Expedition aboard the Belgica, where he and the relatively inexperienced crew fought with the challenges of navigating storms and deadly icebergs. Roald took the experiences of the Belgica onto his next expedition, navigating and wintering in the Northwest Passage in one go. Roald managed with comparatively humble means what had been the doom of the Franklin expedition half a century before. In 1905, Norway gained its independence.
Oslo I festskrud. Tusenvis av mennesker vrimler I gatene, barn og voksne med flagg I fryd og forventning. Den folkevalgte kong Håkon I marineuniform.
He and the crew returned to a country gripped in patriotic fever. The ranking senior polar explorer, Fridtjof Nansen, endorsed Roald's achievements. Fridtjof became a sort of mentor and father figure to Roald. At the same time, talks and publicity earned him a pretty penny. And so Roald bought this place in 1908 and together with his brother Leon built a sort of polar exploration business empire. This place provided him with the privacy and comfort so lacking aboard the ships. Many an expedition were planned within those four walls. Initially, Scott and Amundsen were meant to do the polar opposite things. Robert had been very public about the purpose of the 1910 expedition, to be the first team to reach the South Pole. Roald was to take Norway's only polar ship, Fram, via the Cape Horn to the Bering Strait, get the ship stuck in the ice, and drift with the ice across the North Pole, confirming his mentor Nansen's oceanographic theories. All that changed when Roald learned that the American Robert Peary had been the first on the North Pole.
Beg to inform you, Fram proceeding Antarctic. Amundsen.
Stocked up on food, equipment and 100 Greenland dogs, Amundsen instead took Fram to the Bay of Whales in the Antarctic. With a meticulous eye for detail and planning, he had carefully adapted the methods of the native Inuit people encountered during the Gjøa expedition. Clothes are made of reindeer and wolfskin. He kept an eye out for the fatal disease scurvy, hunting for and feeding on regular doses of seal. Roald and his team made steady progress south until they stood at the geographical South Pole on the 14th of December 1911. Scott and the Terra Nova expedition made considerably slower progress, much owing to the lack of dogs and heavy equipment load. Only about 1 month later did they conquer the South Pole. They found Amundsen's tent with a note.
Dear Captain Scott, if you can use any of the articles left in the tent, please do not hesitate to do so. With kind regards, I wish you a safe return. Yours truly, Roald Amundsen.
But their greatest struggle lay ahead of them. On their way back to the base, the temperatures plummeted and the fierce blizzard sealed their fates.
Snow covered till up above the door, with Scott in the middle. Half out of his bag, the frost had made the skin yellow and transparent, and I've never seen anything worse in my life.
Some historians call it a race. I don't think it was. Even with a level playing field, a similar starting point and date, Amundsen's planning and Greenland dogs were simply unbeatable. To the victor goes the spoils, and Roald capitalized on his success. With his newly acquired fame, he toured the world extensively. I think Roald enjoyed the leisurely life of a gentleman celebrity compared to the rough life of a seaman. He was, after all, a middle-class boy and a bit of a social climber. But he was a loner and not a family man. During World War I, he also started to plan his next expedition. I asked Børge Ousland, explorer of the North and South Poles, of the challenges of fundraising for expeditions, then and now.
Egentlig så det overraskende likt, I hvert fall for kort tid siden så var det, og mye av det samme gikk på å prøve å skaffe sponsorer og holde foredrag og skrive bøker og sånne type ting, men jeg opplever faktisk at de siste kanskje 10 årene, eller mest de siste få årene, 5 årene, så har det endret seg ganske mye, hvor det med sosiale medier betyr veldig, veldig mye mer enn før. Og sponsorene ser jeg gjerne på, først på hvor mange følgere du har på Instagram for eksempel, og så spør de hva du skal gjøre. Så der det en ganske stor forskjell.
Roald and Leon Amundsen made some successful investments during World War I, enabling them to invest into a new polar ship. She was named after Norway's queen and was set to sea with royal approval in 1917. The Maud expedition was supposed to be Amundsen's scientific redemption. With a crew of 9, Maud left Tromsø the 16th of July that year and sailed up the Northeast Passage. Unfortunately, the entire expedition was haunted by bad luck. 2 members of the expedition were lost and perished. Roald came into danger too. He fell off the ship, broke his arm in 2 places, and I suppose you can say he barely escaped a polar bear attack. Oh, and yeah, he tried to raise a polar bear as well as a domestic animal. Hell, he even adopted 2 Inuit girls, Nita and Camilla, who would later come to Oslo. Bit of a long story that, so we'll leave that for another episode, shall we? In 1923, the chief simply had to say goodbye, leave the ship to manage the mounting debts. Among the creditors was his own brother, Leon. The crew stayed loyally on the ship, and during 7 years, Harald Sverdrup, the resident scientific director, carried out important oceanographic measurements. Maud was eventually seized as payment by the creditors. Forgotten, abandoned and derelict, she sank to the bottom of Cambridge Bay in Canada. Instead, Amundsen turned to the power of flight, but his bank account never matched his ambitions. Lincoln Ellsworth looked up to and admired Amundsen. He proposed to finance Amundsen's adventure on one condition, that he would join. Taking off from Svalbard with the new seaplanes, Amundsen and Ellsworth made attempts at flying over the North Pole. An emergency landing 87 degrees north meant another brush with near death. Fortunately, the crew made a runway on the ice and made a miraculous escape. They returned as heroes, but Roald recognized the need for a more stable aircraft. He had to look for another international partner. The airship Norge was designed and manufactured in Italy by the General Major Umberto Nobile. It was also piloted by Nobile, who had brought his own Italian crew. Amundsen was the expedition leader and had chosen his own allies in key positions. From the beginning, Roald was critical of Nobile, whose judgment he distrusted. Opposed to the cold and withdrawn Amundsen, Nobile was of an Italian emotional temperament. During the preparations, the 2 men barely talked and only met twice. The mixed team was willingly trapped together in what was essentially a noisy cold metal fridge attached to a giant balloon hanging hundreds of meters above the ground, sailing into uncharted territory. On May the 12th, 1926, the expedition arrived at the geographical North Pole. Amundsen noted that Nobile dropped several flags, among them an oversized Italian flag. In spite of these minor provocations, Nobile navigated Norge successfully from Svalbard to Alaska. Publicity tours followed. A bitter feud erupted over the rights to publish an account of the expedition. Both Nobile and Ellsworth competed with their claims. To this old chief, this sort of expeditional rivalry was something new. He was used to being the chief, calling the shots. Rival nationalism also played a role.
Nasjonalisme og patriotisme, det betyr mye mindre nå enn før. Du må huske på den brytningstiden Norge var i rundt 1905 og slutten av 1800-tallet, og hvor mye turen til for eksempel Nansen betydde med fram. Så det er likheter, det er jo en viss patriotisme og stolthet som gjør at, eller som man føler da, når nordmenn fremdeles vinner terreng i polarområdene, men jeg tror ikke i samme grad som før.
Amundsen mounted a clumsy literary attack on Nobile in his account, My Life as a Polar Explorer.
I remember Nobile falling over on plain ground and how he couldn't get up. It's ridiculous to think that men of the half-tropical race, without elementary understanding of survival in the cold, could hope to undertake an expedition that required knowledge of how to survive on the ice.
Fate would send Nobile once again to the North Pole. Italy and Mussolini's pride demanded satisfaction. Another airship was constructed, this time more aptly named. On the 24th of May, 1928, civilization lost all communication with the Italia expedition. It was clear to the whole world something had to be done.
On the 26th of May, Roald was attending a dinner here at Dronningen in Oslo. The Norwegian defense minister asked him whether a rescue mission could be launched. Right away, said the old chief.
Han hadde jo sikkert en annen slags følelse, og i hvert fall en dyp relasjon til Nobile. Og så tror jeg egentlig ikke han hadde noe valg. Jeg tror han ville bli oppfattet som veldig arrogant hvis han ikke la i vei og i hvert fall gjorde et eller annet for å prøve å finne han.
This whole disaster presented an opportunity for Roald to redeem himself. And so, sitting in his house at Uranienborg, Roald planned his last expedition. Although Mussolini declined the help, there was nothing stopping Amundsen from mounting a private rescue attempt. He called upon his remaining international contacts to acquire the French seaplane Latham 47. Eyewitnesses describe Roald as being remarkably silent and resigned on the day he and the mostly French crew flew out from Tromsø. On the 18th of June, the plane simply disappeared out of existence. As time passed, all hope and belief that Amundsen and his team were still alive faded. Despite the searches, they never found the plane, his crew, or what really happened. On the other side of the world, they did eventually recover his old ship Maud, raised from the bottom of Cambridge Bay. She was brought back to Asker in 2018, 100 years later. The ships Fram and Maud mirror the roles of Nansen and Amundsen in the Norwegian collective psyche. Nansen remains a national icon, institutionalized, polished. Amundsen's legacy is a little bit more rougher around the edges. He was not a scholar, scientist, or a literary man. He was an explorer from an old world where actions spoke louder than words. Roald would never have been comfortable dusting away in some museum.
Jeg tror faktisk ikke de tenkte så mye på det med eller uten redning egentlig. Og det var litt sånn som det var på den tiden. Og det var faktisk også sånn på vår ekspedisjon over Nordpolen nå i fjor. Da var vi jo på mesteparten av turen, over 1000 kilometer, var vi jo utenfor mulighet til å bli reddet på noe fornuftig måte. Men du må jo bare gå for det du tror på, ellers er det ikke noe vits å starte. Så når vi var i gang, så tenkte vi faktisk ikke så mye på det. Vi trodde på det, vi trodde vi ville klare det, og vi bare sto på, og det tror jeg de alle gutta på den tiden også gjorde.
So I'm standing here at Uranienborg, looking out at this house. And this place is flooded with people and tourists, and I'm having a really hard time actually filming here. So with that, I would like to say that perhaps in spite of his best efforts, Roald Amundsen did not manage to destroy his reputation after his own death, and he remains a legend still today.
Tusen takk. Det var alt jeg hadde.
Hyggelig å bidra til polarhistorien. Det er viktig.
And so yet again, my dear friends, the end of another video. If you like polar history, there's a few relevant links down in the description that you can have a look at. And if you enjoy my work, you can support me on Patreon, and also, as always, do not forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, adieu.